So, I want to talk about boundaries with you. It's a really important element when it comes to building a healthier relationship with yourself. I think something that many people, including myself sometimes, overlook is the fact that boundaries are for us to develop relationships, to create mutually beneficial relationships. And I think sometimes it's hard to keep boundaries with ourselves. And so it's difficult to keep boundaries with other people. And one of the things that I really think is important in developing a healthy relationship with ourselves is keeping our word to ourselves and developing that part where it says, where you say, actually, if I say no, I mean no, and rebuilding that trust in your word, the trust that you have in your word. Sometimes when we've communicated a boundary with someone, we don't want to ask them again because sometimes we feel like, oh, well, I've already asked them. If I have to ask them again, then it's going to seem like I'm asking too much or whatever it might be, whatever reason. But let's take the example of asking someone to give you a heads up before they come over. There was this really funny TikTok that I saw where you had this mum who had asked her son to to call before he comes over. He's now a grown adult. So she asked him if you could call before you come over. I've got things that I'm doing. I don't want you to just pop up at my house, essentially. And she has communicated that boundary. So when he comes over the next time, he knocks the door, she opens it, and she's like, oh, surprised to see you here. He's like, oh yeah, I was in the area, so I thought I'd just stop by. And she was like, yeah, but actually I did ask you to give me a heads up before you're coming over. And he was like, yeah, but I'm here now. So, and she was like, no, call me. And he was like, what do you mean call you? And she closed the door, went back in her house. I thought it was really funny. Closed the door, went back in her house, and she's like, call me. So he called her, and then he was like, you're being really silly. Mum, can I come in because I'm outside? And she was like, oh, actually, I'm in the middle of something. Actually, today's not a great day. If you could come back tomorrow, that's fine. I'll see you then. And he was like, what do you mean you're busy? And she was like, yeah, I'm busy. So, come back tomorrow. I'll be ready for you. And he was like, but Mum, I'm already here. And she hung up the phone. And I think that that's a great example of boundaries, because it's kind of like sometimes you will ask someone to meet your boundary for you, but then as soon as they fall over that boundary or disregard that boundary for whatever reason, I think most of us are kind of geared to being like, oh, well, don't worry, you're here now, because of the inconvenience that you will be causing that person because they're already here, or they've already done it, or they've whatever it might be. But that's where our word to ourselves has to be really strong, because if that mum said, oh, fine, don't worry, come in, the son, what would he have done? He wouldn't have learned that actually there would have been no inconvenience at all. There would have been, oh, fine, she's fine with it. That boundary that she set earlier doesn't really matter that much, essentially, because she's not even keeping up with it. So that's one of the things with boundaries, that we have to be secure in ourselves to know that our boundaries matter, our needs matter. What we ask for a reason. And if someone else is inconvenienced because you have actually said ahead of time, this is how I want you to manage me or deal with me or communicate with me, share space with me, whichever way you want to word it. If someone comes and says, I'll disregard all of that, I'm going to deal with you how I want to deal with you, you have the right to say, that's not how I want to be handled. So essentially, it's either you treat me how I want to be treated, or this relationship is going to take a couple steps back because it's not mutually beneficial anymore. you know? And I think there is a challenge, though, with keeping our word to ourselves, because usually we don't want to be a burden. We don't want to be responsible for somebody else's upset or sadness or anger or whatever it is. And I think one of the things that I will put out there essentially is to say that you are never responsible for anybody else's feelings. And I think many of us have been taught that our needs are an inconvenience. Having a need is inconvenient. And when I think about like when we were children, us needing something, not usually, sometimes for some of us, if not all the time for others, us wanting something, needing something was an inconvenience. And it was made very clear that us having needs, having a desire for comfort, having a desire to, I don't know, have a conversation about something that maybe our parents maybe thought was like really insignificant. They didn't have time to sit down and like talk about, I don't know, whatever game it is that you're playing, or what happened at school or whatever it might be. When we've asked for those things, if that need hasn't been met, if we haven't learned that our needs are important, it can feel really difficult to communicate that need to someone else in adulthood, essentially, because we don't know what we're supposed to be doing and we feel like we're asking too much of that person. But I want to tell you that we're not asking too much. Like, our needs are important, and there's going to be a consequence of some sort, whether it is that you internalize the consequence for that person not meeting your needs and you not asking anymore, or it's an external consequence where that person feels the distance, feels that they have to go home and come back, or feels that, they're not going to get what they want from you at that time. There has to be a consequence. And I think we internalize the consequence in the first stages, essentially. But what I was saying actually was about when we're children and we're not taught how to communicate what our needs are. As adults, when we're communicating what those needs are, we have to give ourselves time and grace, and understand that logically it's okay for us to have needs, because it is. Otherwise, how will anyone know what you like, what you don't like, how to have a mutually beneficial relationship with you? They won't know. A lot of us are just trial and error, and what works, it's like, great, perfect, this person I can vibe with. But as soon as we meet someone that we don't necessarily vibe with in that way, we disregard the fact that actually maybe with this person we need to communicate with them. We need to tell them what it is that we want from them. And sometimes the sad part, actually, when I think about it, is that some friendships or some relationships have absolutely thrived on you not having boundaries. When it comes to like communicating to people who are so used to you not having boundaries, some people won't like that, because now they have conflict. Essentially, it's conflict that you are asking for what you want. You are asking for them to manage you or manage your relationship in a different way. And so that will mean that you will lose some friends, which isn't nice. Some would say, were they friends? If they were always just there because it was easy to be around you, because you made things easy for them and you made things one-sided and you were okay with that, were they friends? Because there's like sayings where people say you never really lose friends, you just you gain clarity if anything. But it is tough, especially to communicate your needs when you fear that you might lose that person as a result of you asking for what you want. But if that's the foundation of your relationship, then essentially the relationship is serving you in a different way, which maybe you need to explore for yourself. Because if you don't want to lose that person, what is it that they are providing that you think you need? Which is, I think, is a something to reflect on, maybe, to think about the dynamics of your friendships and think, okay, well, if this person had nothing, zero, to offer me, would I still want to be friends with them? If they had, limited time, if they had limited money, if they weren't buying me things, if they weren't someone that was able to provide me access to this or that, would I still want to be friends with them? Is this someone who provides you emotional support? Is this someone who is able to, I don't know, look after your kids, maybe? And if that's the case, if you recognize that this person is fulfilling a particular need of yours that you don't necessarily know how you would fulfill otherwise, and you're reluctant to communicate what your needs are, then you are dependent on that person. And one of the things actually that I always come back to is the question of whether it is healthier to be needed or wanted. Do you need this person? I think I've been on the side of people where I have felt sometimes that I'm needed, especially in like my relationships with my parents, some, friends and that kind of thing, where I feel like I'm needed, and it almost feel like I can't drop anything, because if I drop something, then there's going to be this domino effect, essentially, and it's a lot of pressure. And while it can feel nice to be needed, that's a whole nother thing we can go into another time. For me, I've come out of that desire to be needed, and I really want to be wanted. I want someone to have a choice, or visually see the choice, that they don't need me, they actually just want me there because they enjoy me, as opposed to needing me there because I'm a crutch for something else, or needing me there because they don't know how to do X, Y, or Z by themselves, or needing me there because, they don't have any other options. I understand that in relationships there are going to be times when you feel like you need someone. That's different to me. But when it comes to feeling like this person's life is in my hands, or this person's success, and this person's everything, whatever thing that you want to put in that place, this person needs me. For me, it feels very uncomfortable. And so that's kind of like the thing the thing that makes me, or has made me, more independent, because I don't want to have to rely on anyone. I want to ask for help because I want to ask for help, as opposed to needing to ask for help. Definitely gone off track here with boundaries, but just thinking about, the dynamics of your friendship and your relationships. If you're afraid to ask for what you want from that person or those people because you fear that you will lose them, what is it that they're providing to you that you feel like you cannot live without? Boundaries is not to create distance. Boundaries is usually there because you want a relationship with someone. And I think that's a good place to start. When you're having a conversation with someone about what your needs are, let's soften the blow a little bit and say, like, I love you, or I really care about you. But actually, when you do this thing, it rubs me the wrong way, or it means that I have to flurry around and I don't always get to plan, or, actually when you talk about this particular thing, it kind of triggers something in me, and I would prefer if we didn't talk about that, because whatever, it's a way to like soften it, to say, I love you. I want our relationship to get stronger. That's the thing. I want our relationship to get stronger. And if I keep holding this to myself, I fear that there will become a distance, because I'm essentially adjusting myself to be around you. And I say that in the nicest way possible, because I love you. I want to be around you, but I don't want that to come at a sacrifice to myself, my relationship with myself. That's wild. Just in me thinking about all of these things, I'm like, boundaries is hard, but boundaries is needs. You're communicating what your needs are. Again, like, usually I hear people talk about, I just cut that person off. And I'm like, okay, well, clearly you didn't want a relationship with them, because if you did, you would have communicated. But that's not the case. A lot of people don't communicate. They just think it's the easier thing to just be all or nothing. And I don't think that's healthy. Even if you are deciding you are going to end a relationship with someone, I do also think to communicate that to them. I'm ending this relationship because, I remember there was a friendship that I had with someone. We didn't agree in, there had been many things, to be fair. This is an example of when boundaries would have been important, but also an example of when there are no boundaries that maybe would have fixed something like this. So I used to be in a friendship with someone, and we had different views on racism. And, I hadn't said, that certain things have bothered me, and I hadn't communicated what my needs are in relation to certain behaviors that this person was kind of presenting. And I kind of let it go. I let things go. I internalized them, or I just said, they're not going to understand, so I'm not going to ask. And then it got to the point where a big thing happened, and we'd never had a conversation about racism, and we had two very different views. But I was already in that space where I was noticing certain things where I didn't say. I just kept it to myself. So to this person, they're like, well, where is this all coming from? Oh my goodness, kind of thing. But for me, I was already building a case to distance myself from that relationship, where now I look back and I think, okay, well, maybe if I had spoken up about certain things, they would have understood my views beforehand. But when we had this conversation, and it was like the peak of the issue, it just, I was just very clear, and I just said, I don't think we're going to be able to be friends anymore. And I felt liberated, actually. I felt liberated. But there are some times when that person maybe, will never understand. And the thing is, I don't think that this person understood why I was ending the relationship, but I didn't need them to understand. I guess I was closing that chapter by communicating this is the end of our friendship because of these things, kind of thing. And that felt good to me. But as I was saying, like there's like sometimes where there's no amount of boundaries that will help, because there is a certain views. If you don't agree on certain things, maybe you just don't want to be friends with that person. Maybe you don't want to be in a situation with that person. But thinking about boundaries, how important it is to have boundaries with yourself. You tell yourself yes, or you tell yourself no before you head out to communicate what the needs are to somebody else. So it all starts with observation. Yeah, all starts with observation, observing when your mood shifts, observing where boundaries need to be set, observing people who overstep or take advantage of certain things that come naturally to you. It doesn't matter if it's something that you do out of your way, or if it's something that you do quite naturally. Like, you still deserve to be respected. And if you observe those shifts or those challenges in relationships, that's like the first step. You observe it. The next step, I would say, would be to acknowledge in yourself what boundary has been crossed. Because once you understand, okay, actually, this is why I feel challenged, or I don't know, a twinge, or some level of discomfort when this person has said something or done something or whatever it might be, it's because I feel like they are overstepping a time boundary, a space boundary, a financial boundary, a personal space boundary, security boundary, whatever it might be. It might be those kind of things where you think, yeah, actually, I'd feel more comfortable or more settled in this relationship if this person was able to understand this particular thing is important to me. Okay, cool. So you've observed, you have acknowledged which boundary it is that's being crossed for yourself. And then I want you to think about, okay, so what's the consequence? If you are to communicate what this need is, this desire that you have to make your relationship stronger, aka boundary, if this person isn't able or isn't willing or is dismissive of what you're communicating to them, this is before you've even approached them, by the way, then you would think, okay, essentially that's either going to mean a distance in our relationship, or that's going to mean next time you come round to my house, you don't tell me beforehand, you're going to have to go home. Even if I'm doing nothing, you're going to have to go home. It could be, what else? If you don't give me, I don't know, half an hour to just prepare myself or settle myself after an argument, I fear that I'm going to end up saying things that I don't mean. So I just need some time, especially when it comes to like conflict. It would be so good if when you're not in conflict that you agree how you're going to manage conflict. Things like calling people out of their names, things like throwing things like low jabs, even if they're said, at a time where you think, oh, well, that person just wanted to hurt me. Okay, but why do you want to hurt me? Why do you want to hurt me? You can argue and keep the insults. If you're going to do insults, I don't argue in that way. I barely argue, to be fair. But if you're going to argue with someone that you love, why are you trying to hurt them? That's not healthy. And then it brings up questions of, okay, so is this what you always think? Exactly. So then you start to have doubts in your mind about how this person really views you. It's just unnecessary. But anyway, again, going off, but thinking about, the what it is that you would ask for if you're thinking about, okay, when we are in conflict, we need a safe word. What's the safe word? That's also a boundary. Let's agree to give each other space to think. Let's agree to not talk over each other. Let's agree that if something happens that, we don't go to sleep angry, or whatever it might be, whatever works for you in your relationships. It's great if you can communicate what those needs are, what those boundaries are, especially before those needs and boundaries need to be met. But yeah, I mean, once you understand, okay, actually there will be a consequence, either an internal consequence where you disregard that part of yourself, or an external consequence where that person feels some level of discomfort or distance or whatever it might be, because you have to distance yourself from them, or you have to ask them to redo something, or again, go home, or whatever it might be. So yeah, I want you to keep that in mind. And then it's only once you are settled and you fully understand the foundation of why you are asking for that person to help you to meet your needs in that way, because your needs are your responsibility, but people can actually support you if they want to. Once you get to that point, then you communicate. Then you use the words of, look, I love you so much. I really care about our relationship, but actually there's this one thing, or there's these few things, or whatever it might be, that kind of rub me the wrong way. And I've been putting up with it for some time because actually I'm worried about hurting you. I don't want to cause you any level of discomfort, but actually this thing is causing me discomfort. So I'm hoping we can get to like a mutual ground where we can both, figure out how we can share a healthy relationship, essentially. That's what it comes down to. I like that. And then the last thing, after you've communicated and this person in an ideal world has said, I had no idea. I want you to keep that boundary for yourself. So the next time that person slips up, because remember, they have learned a way of being around you, and it's going to take time sometimes to interrupt that pattern. So the next time they step over that boundary, you need to be in a particular position where you say, hey, remember I mentioned that I didn't like when you did that? Okay. That person said, oh, sorry. I'm learning. I'm going to do better next time. Cool. How many times you want to allow that person to overstep that boundary before you allow that consequence to come to the surface is up to you. But essentially, you are the keeper of your boundaries. Don't expect people to meet them for you. You just don't. You're going to have to be the person that says, hey, you crossed my boundary. You're going to have to be security, essentially. You are your own security. Wow. Yeah. You are your own security. And it doesn't mean you have to go in all guns blazing. It just means, I'm only going to tell you this a couple more times because this is really causing me discomfort. And I would hope that in our relationship, you don't want me to feel uncomfortable. And if you do, or if you don't care, then maybe we need to end this relationship. And that all comes when you have a healthy relationship with yourself, when you realize that you are secure in yourself, where you don't need people, you want people. And that's the key. That's the key. When people say, I don't need anyone. Yeah, maybe you do. But the whole idea is not to distance yourself. It's not to create a relationship with yourself that is so good that you don't want people. Do you know what I mean? I don't know if that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. But needing someone and wanting someone is very, very different. But I think I'm going to leave it there. I've been talking for long enough. But let me know your thoughts in the comments.